We are going to start our webinar. Let's talk about citizen observatories. Then first, I hope you and your beloved ones are healthy and safe. It's a great opportunity that we can enjoy this time together. Just thank you for the people that is happy, safe, cup of coffee, tea, or something, and enjoy the webinar. This webinar is an event created as part of the Global Citizen Science Month, a global initiative promoted by Science Started and the School for the Future of Innovation in Society at Arizona State University with other organizations. If you want to know more, please follow the link available on the slide that is already sharing with you. At the same time, this webinar is part of the dissemination activities of Cause for Cloud project. Cause for Cloud, or Citizen Observatory Services for the European Open Science Cloud, is a project developed by a consortium of 15 organizations located mainly in Europe and Colombia in South America. It's a project funded by the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program. The project aims to develop digital services so that citizen science platform known as citizen observatories, we will see this later thanks to Margaret, are viable in the long term and more global in scope. The project will make these services available in the European Open Science Cloud. Among other things, the new technologies that we are developing will allow for improved interoperability, networking, data quality, security, and management of data within the citizen observatories. Okay, let's have some guidelines before starting our webinar. And before checking our program, first I will mute your mic. I already mute your mic during the first part of the webinar for prevent interference, but rest assured that we will have a session for question and answers at the end. Also, please be aware that this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded on the Cause for Cloud YouTube channel. So please, we invite you to close your camera now. Otherwise, it's going to be quite difficult to manage the privacy and assure all of these kind of things during our record and our process of uploading this in YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everyone. Just before getting engaged in this, few recommendations for people, especially where Zoom is new for them. In Zoom, you have 2 or 3 options for participating. With the red line, you see manage participants. In manage participants, you could find options like a yes, no, go slower, go faster, or like a okay thing, okay icon. Then please use the reaction that you want to engage in some kind of icon conversation and you want to react to what our speakers are going to talk about. At the same time, you have the chat in the right down corner. Many of you are using already this option. Then please use this chat to share your comments, idea, but especially your questions, because my colleague Sonia is going to collect these questions during the webinar, and she's going to share with the panelists these questions at the end of the session. Then please don't forget to share your questions or comments. And the third one that we want to have a quite interactive session is a poll. In some points, I'm going to share some polls with you. Please reply then, and we are going to know a little bit more who are joining this webinar. Then, before starting about social networks, we invite you to tweet or sharing your social network ideas from the webinar. Please tag at Cause for Cloud, and we suggest to include the hashtag Citizen Observatories and CITSI. Then it's gonna be easier later to collect these tweets and let's see our conversation through social networks. While I am giving a short introduction, please let us know in the chat from which city you are joining in. It could be amazing to see for many places that you are joining. And let's review our agenda or our program. Nice, Barcelona. Our agenda for today. We will be discussing mainly 4 questions until 14:50 or so, and we will have later 15 minutes of Q&A. Then our first section by Margaret is going to be what is a citizen observatory. It's going to be a little introduction about citizen science because we have a broad audience today. After that, our panelists, Jauma, Margaret, and Joanne, will be talking about these 3 questions. What are the main challenges that citizen observatories are facing and how to tackle them? What is and what can be the role of citizen observatories taking into account the current challenges like pandemics and global change? And the last one, but not the less important, how society can be involved in the evolution of citizen observatories. For these last one questions, I invite you, all of you, to write your thoughts, ideas, and comments. Could be amazing because essentially, like Joanne were telling us, this is a question for you, how society can be involved in that. And after that, the question and answer session. Then let's start with our first poll. Right now I am launching a poll. I invite you to reply. Why are you interested in citizen observatories? Please reply the poll. Okay, one answer. Nice, it's growing. 3, 4, 5. Nice. Thank you. Okay, we have already 30 responses and increasing. Nice, thank you. Okay, someone else waiting for response. I have 81 of the people that already vote. Please don't be, yes, nice, 83%. We are almost on the 100. Okay, 91%, almost done, and we finished the poll. We are just 4 more people waiting for. Okay. Okay, let's move from the pool. Are you seeing the results? Can you confirm in the chat if you see the results? Nice, thank you. Then 60% of the people said I am involved in citizen science and I want to learn about citizen observatories. Nice, we have many practitioners of citizen science here. 18% I am involved in citizen observatories and I want to know more. The same percentage I want to learn. I don't know what is citizen science or citizen observatory, and we have a small percentage that they said none of this is my answer. Really interesting. We have a broad scope of people and profile. I think that is going to be a very interesting discussion at the end. Then let's move to the next. The next point is I will present you our great speakers. But before presenting you our great speakers, let me say to you that people from Athens, Greece, Bogota, Colombia, Barcelona, Terrassa, Netherlands, Roger from Cardiff, sorry for my bad pronunciation, Amsterdam, Leiden, Thessaloniki, Cadiz, wow, Girona, oh, Hungary, oh, very nice. Germany, Madrid are joining our webinar. Nice, thank you for, okay. Larissa, Greece, and Brazil, very nice. Yes, an international audience, Mariana, very nice. Then, let me introduce our panelists for the webinar. Then first, Margaret Gold. Margaret currently works at the European Citizen Science Association as project officer on the WebServe project. Before that, she was science community coordinator in the digital collection program at the Natural History Museum of London. And her research is focused on user interface and user experience consideration in crowdsourcing, citizen science, and creative collaboration. Joanne. Joanne has been researcher for more than 50 years at CREAF and GIS developer. He's considered an expert in JPEG 2000 format. He has coordinated different European level projects, H2020 projects, as well as some other national and local projects related both with remote sensing and geospatial standard and application. Joanne is our leader of the Common Architecture and Interoperability in Cost for Cloud project. And Jaume Piera. Jaume is our Cost for Cloud coordinator, scientist of the Institute of Marine Science in Barcelona. And yes, sorry, I didn't move the nice pic with the penguins. And over 20 years of experience in multidisciplinary research programs. His research interests are focused on information technologies applied to environmental monitoring technologies, particularly those based on citizen science approaches known as citizen observatories. And myself, as moderator, I am Karen Soacha, researcher of the Institute of Marine Science, PhD student working on knowledge management in citizen observatories. And essentially, I have been involved in citizen science, open data, governance, and environmental information system for more than 10 years. Nice to see you, all of you. Now I will give the word to Margaret. She will share with us an introduction to the citizen observatory concept. Margaret, we are you right now. I will stop sharing my screen and it's yours.
Thanks, Karen. It's too bad I can't see everybody to wave, but I'll wave. And I look very much to hearing your questions. I won't read them live in the chat. I'll let Karen collect those for me. But I've stuck a link in the chat of the slides that I'm talking to. This is a presentation that I've given before. I'm completely cheating. And I won't go through all of the slides, but I find it really useful to have a range of slides there. If questions come up, I can turn to them later. And it also gives you a little bit more information that you can look at any time. So I'll start sharing my screen and go into those. Here we go. I'm in a classic shared office situation, so apologies that you hear a little bit of background noise, but I'm sure that all of us are in very similar situations. As Karen mentioned, I'm part of the team in the We Observe project, which is looking at citizen observatories across all of Europe. And there's a piece of research that I'm doing there looking at some of the challenges and particularities of citizen observatories. But as some of you will know, the field of citizen science itself, the wider field, is becoming really quite mature now. There's some really excellent publications that are out there, some really excellent books that you can turn to find out a lot of aspects about citizen science. And if you look at scientific publications, either scientific knowledge that's coming out of citizen science approaches, or the science of citizen science, which is looking at the approach itself, you can see there's a huge amount of growth in publications relating to citizen science. So that's actually a really fantastic sign for the field as a whole about that approach across any realm of science. There's also quite a few citizen science organizations around the world. I work at the European Citizen Science Association myself, and there's quite a few platforms emerging. And I can see in this slide that I've got two big updates I need to do. ECSA, the European Citizen Science Association, has a new logo now. And we've just launched the EU Citizen.Science platform, and I'll share the link for that with everybody in the chat later. But that's a place to find a lot of citizen science resources from fellow practitioners in the field, things that have been developed in practice that are really useful for starting and running citizen science projects. And citizen science is also coming to be understood to have a huge amount of tangible value as well. So it's not just that the involvement of a large number of people makes scientific research possible that would not otherwise be possible. But there's a tangible value to that as well. And these two particular publications have quantified exactly what the value is of the contribution that so many people involved, in this case in biodiversity research, brings to the field. And that translates in the value of the data too. So if you look at the global Biodiversity Index Foundation and biodiversity data, there's a massive amount of that is contributed toward by individual citizen scientists. So people that are contributing wildlife photos, plant photos, anywhere around the world, and providing that actual data on the ground. Open Data Watch is a great website to go to find out about the huge range of open data that's now available. And one of the aspects of citizen science and citizen observatories having such phenomenal growth is because the technology that underlies it. And we're so interconnected with the internet and the web, and the number of people that own a smartphone these days means that you've got a computer in your pocket and actually a monitoring device. So not just photos and your location data, but also a range of other built-in sensors that are hugely useful for monitoring things on the ground. So that's part of what's contributing to the growth in the field. And you can see in this graph that there's a huge number of terms or terminology that's used to describe this. So you may very well be involved in research that doesn't use the name citizen science as its title, but is publicly gathered air quality data, for example, or is volunteer mapping. There's a large number of terms that fall under this wider umbrella of citizen science. So if you look at the basics of what citizen science is, and here's some of the most common terms, it's about the public participating in scientific research. And this is across a wide range of aspects of the research process. And if you look at the three major categories of ways that people are participating in science, they can be contributing data, which is then the collecting or processing data stage of research, or they could be collaborating with the research process and with scientists doing the research, and that's across an even wider range, or even getting into the co-creation of the scientific research, and that's across everything from setting the research question all the way through to implementing any outcomes that come from the research. So within We Observe, we're focused on a specific subset of citizen science. It's called citizen observatories. This name has a European history. It comes from the European Commission, in fact, where coming out of the world of Earth observation and Earth observation data. The idea was that people can get involved in collecting data on the ground to enrich all of the information we know about environmental issues and Earth monitoring issues. So citizen observatories are really focused on the community-based data gathering around any kind of environmental monitoring. Within We Observe, we're looking at consolidating all of the knowledge in citizen observatories and all of the on-the-ground learning that's happened, and trying to bring that together in really tangible ways. So that's just a really short overview of the goals of our project. But in that graph to the left there, you can see three columns: awareness, acceptability, and sustainability. And that's what we've identified in this project as being the main challenges towards citizen observatories and how they operate. So awareness of that method of collecting data, the acceptability of that data being put into use, and then the sustainability of the citizen observatories themselves. And that's something that I'm doing a lot of research on within that project. So across those three main areas, we've got a number of communities of practice. And although they're very far along now, any of you interested in getting more closely engaged, you'd be very welcome to. Within these communities of practice, we're looking at engagement strategies. We're looking at the impact and value of citizen observatories. We're looking at interoperability and more the digital standards or data standards. And Juan can tell you more about that, perhaps, if you're curious. And we also have a sustainable development goals community of practice. So those are the areas that we're focused on. And I will zip through a little bit of that. And really we see citizen observatories, therefore, as solidly under the umbrella of citizen science as a whole. And just to give you a little bit of a sense of the common elements of what makes something a citizen observatory. First of all, it's the participation of citizens on the ground, so right in that location, to contribute observations and data about what they see in the environment around them. The use of mobile and web technologies underpin their ability to participate. It has much more of a focus on environmental monitoring, so environmental governance, environmental management, policy making around the environment. And it's really crucial also in citizen science that the information flows and the data flows are going both ways. So the scientists are always feeding back what's coming out of the contributed data back to the participants. People can see the data, they can already start doing their own analysis, make their own interpretations, pick on decision making in their own day-to-day lives around that data. And I've lost my forward button. There we go. So some of the projects that I'm looking at, this is just an overview of some of them, but there have been quite a few EU-funded citizen observatory projects, and you can see in that column in the middle the kinds of subject matters that they're looking at. And I've put together some of this in a graph as well, so you can see the domains of research that are represented in citizen observatories, and that just gives you a feel for the broad range of types of monitoring that can be engaged in. And finally, I'll close with this map, which is outdated, so I'm going to show you the one on our website. So we've just launched this map. We're inviting anybody that's involved in the Citizen Observatory to add your name to this map. So I'll stick this link in a moment in the chat to come to this website. And the goal of this is for people to find out about other projects that are going on and be able to share notes with each other and learn from each other about how you're approaching it locally, what the particularities are of your local issue are, but maybe learning about methodologies and tools to use. So I'm going to stop there. I think I'm well over my allotted 10 minutes, and I'm going to hand back to Karen. I don't know if Karen's opening is up for questions at this stage or not. Or would you like us to wait?
Yes, we have 2 minutes now. It means you were very effective.
Was I less than 10? Haha.
Yeah, I was just taking the time, and we have still 2 minutes. Then if someone wants to share something additional, or maybe Jaume, Joan wants to add something to this first part before going to the next questions about the definition or introduction about what is a citizen observatory? Or let's go to the next questions. What do you think? Okay, then let's pass to the next question. I will share again with you my screen. Then we were talking, nice, thank you so much, Margaret. Nice introduction about what is a citizen observatory. And our next question is, what are the main challenges that citizen observatories are facing and how to tackle them? And how to tackle them. Then who wants to start? Jaume, Joan, or Margaret?
It really depends on where you want to start. Let me just say that in the Margaret slide, there was this idea of the communities of practice that we observed created more than a year ago. They continue work on defining engaging strategies on users, on the citizen observatories, on the impact of the citizen observatories, and how to improve that impact and quantify it. Of course, on the interoperability part and the communication among projects and so on, and on the sustainable development goals. And this is just 4 items that you could consider respond by themselves the question number 2. So if I may continue, I will focus on the technical side of the question, and I'm happy to hope that others will focus on other parts later. I mean, we have these citizen observatories in place, but just a few are really having a global scope and impact. Most of them are focused on a particular location, a particular area, in a problem that a community detected that they wanted to create that observatory, and so on. So the issue here is with the proliferation of those citizen activities, how you actually integrate them in a single system that is able to actually multiply the effects of citizens observatories, in particular citizen science in general. So we definitely need to have some way of discovering all these projects and allowing the citizens to participate in the ones that are more interested in the easy way. We need a way to easily discover the activities they produce, and in particular the results in terms of probably sets of observations. Not all citizen observatories need to produce observation, but most of them does. And when you have those collections of observations, it's good to be able to share them and to be able to combine them together. it is also good to have a way to actually communicate what you are doing and exactly which are the parameters that you are measuring and how you are doing those measurements and which are the quality of those measurements. And by enumerating all these things that we need to do, actually I'm citing the different levels of interoperability that we need to tackle. So how you solve that? Well, maybe there are other ways, but the way that I know is to try and agree on a set of standards and best practices that those citizen observatories share. And there are plenty of them out there, and the internet is an example of how standards work together to enable an infrastructure that empowers everybody in a system, in a transparent way, where technology becomes invisible, like kind of a magic. Well, actually, I'm working with the OGC, the Open Geospatial Consortium, and improving those standards. And that was the idea of creating this community of practice about interoperability in We Observe, and of course Course for Cloud is also pushing for the same objective, and it's alimenting the community of practice. We are in that community of practice conducting experiments among the experts that are leading those citizen observatories. And we are testing different approaches like Sensor Things API, for instance, creating federation of users where usernames are shared among different projects, or trying to aggregate definitions and concepts and share those definitions in definition services and vocabularies. So all this is a lot of things that we do for just tackling one of the challenges, but there are many, and probably my colleagues will be able to tell you about others better than me. I mean.
All right.
Thank you so much, Johan. Okay, then Jaume.
Yeah.
Nice, thank you.
So I think that one of the major challenges to try to distinguish between citizen science and citizen observatories. I always try to put the emphasis that for me, citizen observatories are part of the infrastructures in citizen science. And to try to provide an analogy, I work at in a marine science institute, and for me it's like the same that obviously for doing research in the oceans, we need vessels of research, and that's the type of infrastructure that maybe we need in one of the main infrastructures that we need in research in the ocean. If we think in terms of, I don't know, cellular biology, in cellular biology, the main, I would say, infrastructure, if you want, are the type of the microscopes. And depending of the infrastructure you have, this type of infrastructure shapes somehow the type of research you can do. Let's think, for example, in vessels. If your vessel can navigate through icebergs, you can plan to have polar biology or polar oceanography. If your vessel cannot navigate through that situation, you cannot. You are very limited to do this type of polar biology. The same happened with the microscopes. If you have an electron microscope, maybe you can think about structural biology, cellular biology. But if you have only optical microscopes, you need to change the questions you want to address. And a similar thing may happen depending of the citizen observatory you have in mind when you develop your own citizen science project. One of the main problems that has been happened during this, I would say, almost 10 years, is that in many cases people were motivated for a particular, I would say, citizen science question, but because there were not very well specified citizen observatories, people create their own citizen observatories to develop their own citizen science questions. And it is, I would say, at the end, highly inefficient in terms that you spend a lot of time creating your own infrastructure. You spend most of the, not most, but a major part of the budget of your project just by creating that infrastructure. And once you have that infrastructure, you start developing your own project. What is the main problem then? then that it's very inefficient. Yeah, and at the same time, when the project finish, the problem is that in many cases you don't have any way to keep or sustain that citizen observatory you have built. I don't know if can you listen me, because I see that Karen is not here.
No, loud and clear.
Yes.
Please continue.
We are here, Jaume.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is that I think we need to address the problem of citizens observatories in a different way that we address the citizen science questions. So imagine, for example, in terms of funding, there are dedicated funding programs for infrastructures. We could not afford, for example, to support the funding of the design and the development of our research vessels if those was in the same program that the oceanography research was. So they are completely separate, and also the research infrastructure, usually the life span or the project itself, the lifespan is much larger than the particular project. In a project, you have specific question that you want to resolve more or less, I would say, on average in 3 years. But once a citizen observatory, well, I think that the reasonable life for a citizen observatory would be at least 10 years. To adapt or to collect different or to support different citizen science projects. And that means that the funding scheme should be completely different. And the way, as mentioned, there are then completely different challenges, as Joan mentioned, for example, many technical challenges about the type of the formats of the data and the metadata you want to support in terms of making the different projects interoperable, the data that so different projects can collect data, but in a, I would say, standard way. So at the end, you have a collections of data that you can combine in different ways. So usually in citizens observatories, then the skills of the people in many cases are more related to, I would say, technical challenges in many cases. Not only because in that particular infrastructure, you interact a lot with the society, obviously, and then you need also specialists that can understand what are the needs and also the techniques to make that these people are motivated to participate on those citizens observatories. That means you need probably people specialized in engagement and engagement technologies, and not only on I would say, collecting technologies, which is also another different type of challenge we have to take into account. So basically, I would say, as a short message, for me, one of the most important questions is to split the concept of citizen science and citizen observatories, taking into account that citizen observatories, I would say, its label of infrastructure is very important.
I can echo the things that you're saying, Jaume, and the research that I'm doing right now within the We Observe project. I've been interviewing a wide range of people that have been involved in running these citizen observatories that were on one of my slides there, asking them about the kinds of challenges that they were bumping into in practice. And interestingly, the biggest one is really a function of them being top-down funded. So when you have EU grant funding, of course, it's this wonderful support mechanism to bring together a lot of partners with specific skills to start these observatories. But the two things that are happening is, on the one hand, the underlying technology, the tool that was developed in order to support the work of the citizen observatory, so a mobile app or a web platform, they almost never get supported beyond the end of that project, or they're insufficiently funded even within that project. There's not a big enough IT budget for them. So in using them, you get lots of feedback about how to improve them and how to make them more robust, but then you don't have the ability to make those improvements within the project, or you don't have a new place to put them in the hands of somebody else to continue to develop them further. So we've got, so things don't go anywhere near as far as they could in being developed on the basis of feedback, but also a reinventing of the wheel each time. There's, I think, in the past been pressure for these top-down funded projects to create their own technology. So they're not reusing and recycling, they're reinventing the wheel. So we've got some lost things there. The other major one that you described is typical EU funding or other forms of grant funding have a really specific time period of, say, 2, 3, 4 years. But the kinds of impacts that you see from citizen observatories is, first of all, the data takes a long time to create this data picture and then to form the analysis. But then to have a real impact, you're either picking it up into changes to environmental governance or new policies being put into place, working with policy makers and decision makers. It's a really long time frame. And then it's beyond the scope of the project to measure that impact. So it's a lost opportunity.
Yeah.
So very much new funding models, and much more about grassroots, because that engagement, that motivation comes from the thing you see in your own backyard that you care very much about doing something about, and you want to be part of collecting the data to make that change. And then the motivations are intrinsic. So instead of having this conversation about how do we get people involved, well, it's coming from the people that very much already care.
Yeah, absolutely right. I agree with you. And also you mentioned one of the key questions, you spend several, I would say, part of your time building your own, I would say, technology. Later on, when you have your technology, then you spend a lot of time engaging and creating the community. And usually this takes the whole period of the project. What happened then? You have motivated people, they are willing to participate, and then you say, sorry, project is gone. We close everything, and say, hey, come on. And what happened then? That the next time you try to engage them, they say, come on, I know what will happen. I will provide, I don't know, observations for a couple of years at most, and then you will close everything. Because that's the problem of this top-down, I would say, top-down funding scheme, that when it's finished, you even are not allowed to support even the server. That means that you need to close the server, unless you have other ways to fund that, I would say. Obviously, in many cases, you need a server in which you are collecting all the data, and but if you are not have any other project in currently that you can support that server, you need to close that server, and that's the end of what you have created.
Okay. Wow. I am just amazed with the attached to time that our panelists are having today. And a very great discussion. Remember that we are going to have like a summaries after the 2 or 3 questions, and we are collecting the comments that our participants are giving us, very interesting comments and questions in the chat box. Please don't forget to share your ideas, comments, and questions in the box. Sonia is collecting that. Okay, then let's move to the other question. We were talking about what are the main challenges that citizen observatories are facing and how to tackle them. And now we are moving to what is and what can be the role of citizen observatories, taking into account the current challenges like pandemics and global change. Okay, who wants to start? Jaume?
Yeah, I want to give you an example. If you allow me to share the screen, okay, I will share my screen. And I will put one of the last slides I wanted to show. Okay, can you see that one right now?
Yes.
Okay, I think it was a good example in the present framework we are involved right now. So obviously, one of the main, I would say, social requirements now is that we need fast methods to diagnosis if someone has been infected by COVID or not. And I thought that this initiative, it's from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It's called Open Sigma. And they thought that it was maybe possible, just an hypothesis, but they think because of the previous experience they have, that maybe just by recording the cough of the people, they would be able, at least in some cases, to distinguish between those patients or people that has infected by COVID-19 and those that they don't have now COVID-19. And what is necessary in that case? Well, they have some resources, so they built a kind of observatory very fast. And basically, this is the link, opensigma.mit.edu. And basically, they call you, or they ask you if you could record your cough. And basically it's, well, you can see, if you download, basically you will see that screen. So basically you record that, and then you put some anonymous information that is important for them, which is your age, if you have feeling very good or bad, or do you know if you have been infected or not. And this creates a big amount of data, and then applying some artificial intelligence methods, they think that maybe by the end they could be able to reproduce or create a system that at least can tell you that the possibility, I don't know, of the confidence in which you have been infected or not. And they obviously they need a lot of records to do that. So that means that they need huge participation of the people. So all of you are invited and to spread that. And then they from the very beginning, they said that they are able to create a good tool. Obviously, the algorithm resulting will be spread to the healthcare community at no cost. So it's clearly a good advantage, a social advantage, in which obviously it's key or essential the people participation. Obviously, then a lot of knowledge how to treat that data, but later on, if they are able to create such a kind of algorithm, it will be really useful. And I would stop, but I think for me, it was one of the best examples, which could be the social return of this kind of social participation in problems like the one we are facing right now.
Okay, thank you, Jaume. Joanne or Margaret, do you want to add something to this question?
I've been actually answering questions in the chat, so I'm not been paying attention. My apologies.
No, it's fine.
I'm in the parallel community in the sidebar.
Yeah, I know that is very engaged because they are asking questions and giving comments. Very nice. We were talking what is and what can be the role of citizen observatories, taking into account the current challenges like pandemics and global change. I think that something that Margaret was talking before, it was a little bit about environmental governance and the relationship of citizen science with that. And I think it would be interesting to explore this a little bit more. What do you think, Margaret?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. There's quite a few of us in different corners of citizen science that have been having this kind of quick check-in with each other. What can we do? So Juan can probably talk a little bit in a moment about a number of people that are gathering around the issue of data and sharing data and getting the data to be that's being gathered to be interoperable. And there's a range of data points around the COVID virus that are being gathered. But others of us, and this is a conversation I've been having, wearing my other hat at the Citizen Science Lab in the Netherlands. We've been talking about so what are all of the knock-on effects of the COVID pandemic within society, and also what are the new permanent infrastructure changes we want to put in place to get closer to this kind of transition thinking, to responding to climate change issues, where we have the silver lining evidence in a lot of cases about what happens when all of a sudden everybody stops commuting and stops driving cars and stops a lot of our behaviors temporarily that are part of what are behind some of the climate change impacts we're seeing. What I'm noticing is that these are conversations that should happen in public. These are big societal questions. So they can be questions along the lines of, well, we've just spent 6 weeks restricting our behaviors really, really, really strictly. And we absolutely saw the point to that. And we rallied behind the underlying goal for those really big behavior changes. How many of those are we prepared to make permanent in the name of another goal, a climate impact, climate change goal? We've just shown ourselves that we're able to take pretty large scale coordinated action, not as perfect as we'd like, but nonetheless an amazing amount of collaboration and joint effort. Having shown that we're capable of this, what more do we want to set into place? So these are quite social science questions, as well as having a monitoring element to look at what was the baseline before, what is the baseline now. And air quality monitoring platforms show us this in quite stark detail. So anywhere where air quality is being monitored in urban settings, there's some pretty stark data points showing the impact that not commuting has had on air quality in the urban areas like Los Angeles or Shanghai. So how many of those are we prepared to make permanent? And if we put the permanent things in place, then continuing the monitoring. So some of it's also just ongoing monitoring, but with a new understanding of what it is it that we're looking at, a kind of before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID point of view. These are all very discussion oriented. One of the things that I've been noticing as well, my own background is in the technology industry, so specifically mobile technology. So I know a lot of mobile app developers, and there was this instinctive rush to make an app. Everybody had this instinct to build an app. And so I have seen 500 different versions of contact tracking or symptom tracking being whipped up by developers. But these were not happening in collaboration with people that are understanding privacy considerations or personal security considerations, people that were not collaborating with scientists about what is the data that you need and what are the data quality factors that you build into how you're collecting the data to make sure it's robust data. How do you continue the data point collecting so it's not just one moment? We've got time series data that we need here. So there was a rush to do stuff without all of the proper collaborative work and without the societal work, because there's a lot of personal liberty issues that are part of this discussion. So it needs to be a societal level discussion. Sorry, that's a loose amount of reactive thoughts to throw at you.
Okay, nice, Margaret. Joan, do you want to add something to this part?
Yeah, I could say something, and I understand that if you make that a question means that there is not much time, so I will try to be fast.
No, we are fine with time. Take your time, Joan, please.
Okay. The thing I wanna say is that is that I will try to not to talk too much about technology this time. So enabling technologies is just one dimension of the citizen observatories problem. There is also the social dimension, and this nicely connects with what Margaret was saying. And eventually, if both dimensions are able to fit together, that's where the benefits are. Actually, the design of the ground truth to those all citizen observatories was based in this idea of the triangle that the citizens form with the data aggregators that are actually the scientists and the policymakers. And it's difficult to see the triangle in this infograph, but you will perceive that. So on one hand, there is this. Margaret put it very well, this impulse of making an app. And this is because you want the citizens to capture information, to create observations. But this is just a means. It's a means for a bigger goal. And the goal is to actually connect with the policymakers and actually condition what they should do for the benefit of the citizens themselves, that I believe together we call it society. So there are several directions that you can do that. One possibility, continuing with the Margaret sentence, is in addition to make apps, we can make maps, and this is the intention of the data aggregations, to actually map the status of the situation, and also, of course, the evolution of the situation, knowing the spatial distribution of the situation. To do that, of course, we need data communication, we need data harmonization, we need interoperability, all these stuff that I like so much, but I will refrain to talk about that a little bit. And by making that map, we are showing the actual situation, and what is even more important, what's the evolution of that situation. And you present that in front of the policymaker with the hope that they listen. And sometimes they don't, and sometimes they do. Maybe they will not listen to the data itself, but the citizens has shown their worries, they has shown their interests, and the citizens that are called society are called also voters. So probably in that other direction, you will get also the impact you want. So to me, this is what should be done to tackle these global challenges. So let's allow citizens to actually produce information on the status of the evolution of the situation. Let's allow citizens to express their opinions and interests, and let's hope that that this confronts a little bit the big interest of the economy and those other things that are also important, but needs to be balanced with other values here, and with other goals, and those goals are represented by the Sustainable Development Goals, and we shouldn't forget about them just because there was a pandemic. The Sustainable Development Goal represents great intentions of the United Nations on actually trying to, move to a better world, to a better society, and we are also working in We Observe to actually connect the Sustainable Development Goals with the cities and observatories.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Joan. I want to propose a small, change, and it's one. While we have a third question, there is, let me share my screen with you. This, how society can be involved in the evolution of citizen observatories. And for that question, I would like to invite our participants to share their thoughts, their answer ideas for these questions, while at the same time, I'm going to try to summarize all this very insightful information that Margaret, Jaume, and Joan were giving us with the first two questions, and asking to them some of the questions that our participants have been doing in this first part. Like I try to create like a break here to move off to the last part of our webinar. And then you are invited to write in the chat while I am doing a small summarize of our first part. Then just following a comment that someone was sharing with us through the chat, Mariano were saying, please, it could be nice to reinforce the definition of citizen observatory. This short summary, citizen observatory in the context of our, work together is a citizen science platform, our community-based environmental monitoring and information system that invite individuals to share observation, typically via mobile phone or the web. We know that there are a number of definitions of what makes a citizen observatory, and despite there are definitions related to community lab, citizen observatory, but we attach to this definition that essentially a citizen observatory have participation of citizens in environmental monitoring and governance, the bidirectional flow of data and information, the enhancement of Earth observation system with citizen-generated observation in situ, and the use of modern mobile and web technologies to do so. I just want to add something once Joan or someone wants to share something. And please.
I would like to, and you will be surprised by that, because in this definition there is also a component technology, but I don't want to talk about that. What I want to say is that there is also a possibility that the citizen is involved from the very beginning, and in ground truth we demonstrated how the co-design principles can be implemented from day one, from the very first idea of how the citizen observatory should look like to the very end on what are the effects of it. The method consists on actually having different sessions of co-design where different actors and stakeholders discuss together how the citizen observatories should be. And this is definitely a methodology that helps citizens to actually condition the future of that particular observatory in particular, but the whole set of citizen observatories in general. So this is also a thing that maybe is not strictly in the definition, but the Commission also wants to emphasize that citizens observatory should have this component.
Great, thank you, Joanne. I just want to add to this that you were saying. Maybe that's why I like this definition about that citizen observatory is a method, an environment, and an infrastructure supporting an information ecosystem for communities and citizens. I think that behind this is this idea of the involvement from the participants in the different stage of a citizen observatory, not just for collecting data. Nice. Then essentially our message right now and from the Cost for Cloud project, citizen observatory are basically citizen science infrastructure, but we have a picture of that, and we work under the principles of co-design the citizen observatories with the different kind of participants, agencies, NGOs, society, academics, industry, and in general, the 4 helix idea, or the 5th helix idea could be nowadays. Okay, I will try just 1 minute more try to summarize what our speakers were telling us in the first question. Let me just try to say, please forgive me if my summary is not the best, but for the question 1 about what is the, sorry, I just want to not rely totally in my memory, about what are the main challenges that citizen observatories are facing. Then essentially, Joanne was talking about interoperability, data quality, and one of the possibilities to tackle then is communities of practice, sharing practices. Jaume was pointed out the importance of avoid or maybe work together to don't duplicate infrastructure and work more in infrastructure or citizen observatories that could share infrastructure despite the different questions that citizen science invite to have, and thinking the long term or the sustainability of the citizen observatories. Some of our participants were sharing their support to this comment through the chat, saying yes, it's right. Even 80% of the citizen observatories infrastructure, after finish the project, they are just not continuing. Margaret was talking about the engagement, the importance of diversity of profile for sustaining, the very important approach to try to find solutions with different, profiles and involve people and the relation with impact in environmental governance. This for the first question. For the second question, then what is and what can be the role of citizen observatories taking into account the current challenges like pandemic and global change? Then Jaume was pointed how this citizen approach, citizen observatories and essentially citizen science is a very fast way to get social response to crises like this. Margaret was pointed out the importance of create a baseline and how this is going to be very important to understand the changes. For instance, in this case, before and after the COVID and all the changes in the environment, society that is this pandemic facing us, and important to have an interdisciplinary, and I am adding like an intercultural approach to work with citizen observatories and not just thinking technology like a solution of building apps. And Joanne was pointing a very interesting like a triangle about citizens, data aggregators, and policy maker, and how it's important that citizens can produce information, express their opinion, and I want to, resolve, like I want to pointed out an idea that is the importance of society balancing the interest with economy and other kind of interests in terms of governance, and how this is a very important thing in terms of facing challenges like climate change and others. Okay, I do hope that this makes a little bit fair the summary that we were working. And I will move on to the questions that some of the participants were sharing before, and then I will open this to my speakers. Then,
can I quickly add something to what you were just summarizing, Karen, and also the discussion about our definitions? I feel that we've missed one element that's really important to name, and that's empowerment. So I'm just going to quickly share two things with you. First, I've shared it in the chat as well. One of the definitions of citizen observatories that I really like is the one that comes from Alan Granger, where he says any use of Earth observation technology which citizens collect data and are empowered by the information generated from these data to participate in environmental management. And also the root of the term citizen observatory comes from a talk that Professor Jacqueline McGlade made at the 2009 Earthwatch lecture, where she was calling on people in the world of Earth observation and formal monitoring to turn much more to citizens, for citizens to inform us. So it's really this concept of there is local knowledge and traditional knowledge on the ground that adds massive, massive value to anything that we're formally collecting. And if we're missing that picture, then we don't have the whole picture. So I do want to add the word empowerment to our list of definitions.
Nice. Thank you so much, Margaret. Okay, then I will share with three of you some of the questions. Please feel free to answer wherever is feeling more comfortable. Then from the first part, okay, this already Margaret replied through the chat, but I want just to share with all of our participants. And I was saying, I would like to know if you think if observatories are also infrastructure for participant-oriented citizen science. I am working with farmers and citizen science, and they are very much interested to work for biodiversity with other farmers around Europe. Most platforms make the impression to them to focus on the data and information. Many farmers seek more opportunities to share the data with other farmers rather than with scientists. Can you recommend a platform for farmers? Any suggestions are welcome from all.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and the one that it made me think of, and that I've answered as well, is the Landsats pilot that's currently happening in Serbia, working together with farmers in the agricultural community to share data amongst farmers with the idea that it's valuable to them. The thing that they bumped into right off the bat is that farmers view information about anything happening to their crops and anything they're doing to boost their crops as intellectual property. They're extremely protective about it. So although they're happy to contribute data to something that's highly anonymized, and then they can use these big view kind of data maps to their own ends, they're not willing to share much more granular detail with the neighboring farmers. They see that as their competitive advantage. I know something to do about this weather, and I'm going to do it, and I don't want you to do it, because then your crops are as good as my crops, and I want my crops to be better than your crops. So that it's actually yielded some interesting things. So it sounds like Annette might be having a completely different experience, where there's a desire to share in a way that they own the platform. And then this comes back to the things that Jaume and Juan were talking about, is that having these interoperable platforms and platforms that are developed well, and that you've got this ongoing development, but then how do you put them into the hands of people that they can say, this is what we create for our ends, and we share it amongst ourselves. So it has to be something modular that you can take and you can build and put together. And I don't think we're quite there yet, although it is one of the goals of Cost for Cloud. So hopefully it's a case of watch this space.
Very nice. I have more questions. I don't know if Jaume and Joan wants to add something to this in particular. I think that no. Then one of our participants were asking, what about the redundancies?
Sorry. I was muted my micro, sorry.
Okay, Jaume, welcome.
I would like just to add, the point, I think it's, Margaret mentioned it, and the question was really good one, is in the terms of empowerment of the people. So I think that citizens observatories should allow, I would say, bottom-up approaches, in terms that people could, those collectives that they have their own, I would say, their own inquietudes or their own goals, the system should be flexible enough to allow them to create their own systems. And I give you an example. For example, now there are several bloggers that are really influent people that are changing on the shape of the way the society is behaving because they are following them. But why? Because they have a blog platforms that allows them to express their opinion, but to share their opinions to the rest of the people. And also there could be some kind of interactions between those bloggers and other people. And these, the bloggers do not need to create their own blog system. They are there. And which I think we should think on the design of several, at least part of the citizen observatories that allow these kind of things. So people, they can create their own project and they can do it. And they don't need to care about, for example, I don't know, privacy, interoperability, and things like that, because this should be, I would say, already solved. For them, it's just, I open my project and I try to share my ideas, and whoever wants to participate, they can do it. If we can design the citizens observatories in such a way, then I would say the social component that Joan was mentioned, the capability, because imagine that at the end, this facilitates I would say the data collection, but not only the data collection, the people interaction, and also the final products, maps, graphs, whichever they need to know if they are collecting or they are producing the type of information they need to try to tackle or to address their own, I would say, social requirements or social inquietudes. And this is the kind of things I think, for me, it's the kind of the new citizens observatory should exist and behave. And also this should be a kind of, I would say, long-term system. I cannot imagine a blog that could only be active for 3 years. Many bloggers would say, I don't want this kind of blog because it will take me after the 3rd year, then it disappeared. I don't want it. And that's why also we need to solve this problem and to have these kind of platforms for a very long-term self-sustaining.
Thank you, Jaume. Okay, I will move to the next question. I think that Jaume and Joan are the right ones because I think it's a matter of technology. I'm not saying that what about the redundancies? For instance, Natosfera and iNaturalist?
Redundancies are great. Just because you have more information in the redundancies and you can quality check the observations you have. So if you have 2 or 3 different projects capturing data in the same area, this is going to be good for you because then you compare and you can find out if your observations are correct, and you can even quantify the data quality. I mean, I understand the question went into another direction, that is redundancies of platforms. These things happen, and there is also a natural selection in the community, where the best platforms remain and the others are, fading out. I mean, you cannot find which one is the best until you try it, and the actual community decides. So that's why I say that redundancies are great, even if sometimes it's a little bit of waste of time and money.
Yeah. In my case, I would say that I don't think that it's really a redundancy. Basically, it's different ways to tackle the same, I would say, problem. Probably at the end, there are different particularities because those platforms evolve, and in some cases that evolve in different ways. I think I understand the problem. I think that the good point is that at the end, all this data goes to a final repositories in which the data can be shared. I mean, if you need to do an analysis of biodiversity, at the end you will have all the data in GBIF. So all the data has been not only with Natosfera and iNaturalist, but also there are many other, I would say, platforms for reporting biodiversity. Observado, Arportalen, iSpot. There are many of them. The point is that now in Cost for Cloud, what we are trying is at least somehow we are trying to collaborate among them, because I think every I would say every community has its own particularity, and I don't think it's good that at the end everything goes to a very unique system, because at the end there is no perfect system. So Probably in one cases, it's better for some things, one platform, and the other has other offers, other services that they like more. And I think it's good that the people can choose. As long, at the end, the whole data ends up to a final repositories in which you can collect all the data and you can work with all the data. And that's the idea, at least in biodiversity. And hopefully, in the future, for many other type of observations, it will be the same. So there will be a kind of global repositories in which all the data from the different platforms are integrated in, I would say, at least in a single one, in which you can collect all the data from, I would say, or methods that you can interact with data from different observatories. That is one of the ideas in COSFOR Cloud.
Margaret, thank you, Jaume. You would like to add something to these questions, or should I move to the last one? We are almost at the end.
I've been sticking it in the chat, so go ahead and move to the next.
Yeah, okay. Then, remember, participants, please, for the last question that we were asking about how society could or can contribute to the evolution of citizen observatories. After this last question, I will read your comments from the chat, or you are welcome. Then our last question is for Margaret. I wonder if you can share ideas on how to facilitate practically, particularly if we want a large-scale societal discussion. How can we make sure all interests are heard and accounted for, especially given the constraints of some groups, particularly like working parents or care workers? How do we make the discussion accessible and pull those different interests together?
I think we find the answers in moving from top down into genuinely co-creative from the very beginning. So if you look at the co-creative methods that have been developed, for example, in the Ground Truth 2.0 project, which was the one that Juan showed the graphic image for, they made a deliberate focus of forming stakeholder groups around an issue in the location where that issue was at play. They chose the general scope of the issue, but it was the real issue and the need was defined by that entire group of stakeholders. So it was the citizens that were affected, any kind of local economic side that's affected, so farmers or industry, the local policymakers, but the line up from the local policymakers up to ministries. So connecting all of these dots to have a really fully fleshed out stakeholder circle, and also people important in the community, the head teacher or a local leader representing the cultural factors of who are the local leaders. And together they defined both the scientific question, the data to be gathered, how that data would contribute to an understanding for the issue and any decision making that came out. So having that from the very beginning is how you catch your opportunity to have all the voices at the very beginning. And it's a difficult process because it means for us as scientists, you have to let go of already having the scientific question nailed down in your mind. You have to be open for it going a completely different direction to meet a genuine local need instead of the publication goal you might have had in yours. So it's quite a trick, because if we're involved in almost by definition, there's a risk that it's becoming top down, even if you're trying to fully support a bottom-up process. So there's something about a supportive infrastructure that genuine bottom-up can happen, and it finds the support it needs. And in the Netherlands, you had this concept of a science shop, and it's not as strong anymore. There was a period of time where this concept was really quite strong. And the idea was that universities had basically an outward-facing window that anybody in the community could come to the university and ask a scientific question, and the university would turn around and research it and give them the answer. They'd get students involved. It'd be master's student thesis projects and things like this. But there was a way for the local community to say that we're really interested in this, we want to know this, and that research happens. And there's a very clear launch of a citizen science project version of that could happen. And I think it's happening in a few places with a few research institutes or universities that have strong ties to their local communities that way. But it's not happening in that structured a way. I think some opportunities lie there.
Thank you so much, Margaret. I think that this is, the next one is gonna be our last question before the closing comments that our participants are sharing with us. This question is, it seems here that the main issue is the long-term viability of any citizen science platform. What are the strategies to achieve after project life of a platform? Many H2020 projects ask for tech transfer after project ends. Is this the case for citizen science?
I can try to answer this. I think it was Zitko who made that question. My point is that we need to avoid, at least for citizens or for platforms, to be funded as a kind of a, I would say, project-based system. Is it the same that I point out in terms of the ships for oceanography or the particle accelerators in physical particles? They cannot afford that. They cannot maintain such a kind of platforms based on projects. It's something that many governments are aware that this kind of infrastructure is a need for the research, and there is a continuous funding allocation every year, and this covered by the governments. The same happened, for example, with GBIF. As a kind of a global biodiversity information facilities. All the involved countries, they pay yearly some amount of money to support that kind of infrastructure. And I think this is something that should happen at the end with the citizens observatories as a kind of infrastructure. They could be a kind of, I would say, agreement between countries and think that this funding or the needs or the budget required to maintain this type of platforms should not be depending of projects. Projects for me are something that you have an idea or you have a societal challenge, for example, COVID-19, and then you need to solve it. It's something that you need fast, I would say, fast actions, something, and you need a very short time or relatively short time period to answer. But on top of that, I would say requirement and question, there should be a very robust infrastructure that supports any new idea in terms of if someone else thinks about a new way of collecting data or a new way of interacting with the people, they can support on something that is very, I would say, very mature, very long-term sustained with people, I would say, supporting that type of things. And then on top of that, there will be, I would say, the innovations both from technology and also from societal point of view. So I just try to answer the question. I think we should change completely the way of we are funding now the citizens observatories.
Thank you, Jaume. Margaret or Joan, do you want to add something to this question?
No, I believe I can just second what Jaume said. Yeah, sure.
Okay, nice. Okay, thank you so much. I think that we are closing our webinar. The last part is going to be the comments that our participants were giving us related to how society can contribute to the evolution of Citizen Observatory. Then the first comment is the education world and school communities in particular are among the core societal partners with an ability to add and contribute to citizen science, as well as environmental participation and management, and vice versa. Then Maria has pointed out the importance of the participation of educational community. One more comment is more than that is like a delimitation of the society for participating in that is in the case of my country, Colombia, the greatest barrier for citizen observatory is the technological, so far especially. The development of an app or a backend front end for citizen observatory is very expensive and demand that the small money recollected goes for this and not for the strengthening of the monitoring or for the community. In Canario, we are lucky because one great app and software developer is part of the group. And one challenge is that still not all citizens have good internet access. Here in Germany, many farmers have very poor connection. We are far from digitalization. This also accounts for schools. And I think that, okay, this is more related to a small conversation that Planet were having. And I think that with that, we are closing our session. I will just share my screen for the last time with you for saying that in the presentation that we are going to share, I think from SlideShare, there are some references that already our participants were talking about, some papers, articles, and reports. Please, if you are interested in Citizen Observatory, join us in our social networks, Twitter, LinkedIn, our webpage, and coming soon our newsletter. And obviously, please, you could find more resources related to citizen observatories or citizen science in the different regional networks that exist. EXA, European Citizen Science Association, Red Iberoamericana de Ciencia Participativa for Iberoamerica, Citizen Science Association in North America, Citizen Science Asia, Australia Citizen Science Association. In some point, we're trying to work together, and many of the regional networks have interesting resources. I would like to finish just giving my special, thanks to Angela, Sonia, and the whole team that were supporting the development of this webinar, to our speakers, Jaume, Joanne, and Margaret, and obviously to all of our participants for the great participation, comments, contributions. Okay, thank you so much. And with this, we finish I don't know if our speakers want to add something before we close the session.
I still keep answering questions and send them to you. Can you get them to everybody that participated? I'm like typing desperately into the chat.
Okay, thank you so much, all of you. See you, I hope soon. Keep safe and healthy.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.